Welcome to the market recap presented by Tackle Trading. Get in the game.
Good afternoon, Tackle Traders, and hello, YouTube. This is Frank coming to you with a market recap for the 19th of September. What a day it was. Man, we saw all sorts of stuff. We saw stuff that did nothing. We saw stuff that took off. Materials and financials went crazy on the bullish side. On the bearish side, you had real estate and utilities just absolutely free fall. It was a crazy day in the market, so I'm excited to take a look at it with you here today. We do have a couple of S&P 500 companies coming out with earnings before tomorrow's open. You got Red Hat reporting tonight, RHT, and Darden Restaurants before tomorrow's open, DRI, for anybody who's interested. Those are our S&P companies coming out with earnings. Nothing too crazy there. Although, I don't know if you saw the, who was it that came out with earnings? Don't forget the movement. They really, it was Copart. Yeah, they came out with earnings pre-market, and it just got ugly, and it just got ugly and ugly and uglier. A huge down day, down over 13%. Earnings can do some crazy things, although we saw some huge movers. Fossil down 9%. That wasn't earnings related. So, there was some crazy movement in the market. So let's get right into it. Before we look at our different sectors and see who was hot and who was ice cold, taking a look at the overall market, strange kind of day in some ways. The S&P and the NASDAQ were both pretty flat. The Russell struggled, and the Dow Jones was pretty strong. Here we are on the S&P 500, kind of ran into that resistance level. We still remain in a fine shape from a technical point of view. Put up the fight at resistance, wasn't ready to break through. We'll have to try again tomorrow, but we do look pretty solid over there technically. NASDAQ does continue to be, relatively weak, especially when we compare it to the S&P and the Dow Jones. Continues to hold its trend line, continues to hold that 50, continues really to go back and forth. It's like the bulls want to get this going, but then they find other places to put their money every day. That's kind of what it seems like to me. Maybe I'm wrong, though. I'm looking at the Dow Jones. Materials were hot today. Financials were hot today. No surprise that the Dow Jones led the way on the index front for us. Another very strong day, carrying over on that breakout from yesterday. As we all know, we've got a little bit of room before we get up to that all-time high there on the Dow Jones. So certainly the most bullish, if you're looking at its chart, of our indexes right now. Then you have the Russell, who just continues to just hang on to that 1700, which is a good thing, that it's doing, at least from a bullish point of view. But it's really just struggling to get any momentum going on. Really has not changed much for a while now, right? This has pretty much been what we've been talking about for a while here. Continue to monitor that 1700, that 50-day moving average, or close below that. Again, I'm not saying it'll happen, but if we get that, that is a bearish signal. No doubt about that. So keep an eye on that. But hey, we've held, we're probably going to have the same conversation tomorrow, right, based off of history on the Russell. So that's where we find ourselves in the overall market, a little bit of a mixed bag today for sure. In our sector front, we had materials finally starting to try to come out of this trading range. Very strong day, really took off, really got going. They did retreat off of their intraday highs, but I wanted to show you guys this. If you go into an hourly chart, one thing that I really liked is off of those highs, it came right back to that actual breakout point. I'm going to kind of zoom in so it's super easy to see, but it came right back to the breakout point, and that's where it caught its footing on the intraday. Personally, I will definitely, anytime something breaks out, I'll always be on the bullish side of things. We do have a little overhead, a little north of $61 on the ETF, but other than that, not a whole lot. If we can get some upward movement tomorrow, upward movement's always important, at least to me, on these breakouts. Breaking out is step one, and then showing upward or downward movement if it's a breakdown. The next day is always the confirmation signal, at least in my opinion. I'm not super aggressive when it comes to getting the second it breaks support or resistance. But very, very bullish candle there today. And while we normally look at energy next, we're going to mix it up a little bit. and look at financials next. They absolutely killed it today. Crazy, crazy. Struggled for a while, held that support, inched up. Glad they didn't break support because that would have been a bearish signal, and then I would have, oh man. So, but this is why technicals are important. I'd like to say that I was more bullish on financials going into the day, but that's not true. But I wasn't bearish, right? So I wasn't getting hurt, and at least I was hypothetically open to some opportunities in that sector. Closing right up at that recent resistance level, a very strong day. Again, we kind of retreated off of the highs, but I mean, these candles on these two sectors were huge today. So people taking some profits, who can blame them? I do think that momentum tomorrow is going to be important. We want to carry over on these breakouts. But hey, a really good start. Very strong day in the financials and the materials today. Over in the energy sector, continued to struggle at resistance. No big surprise there. We struggled there yesterday. Pretty much same place today. Took a run at it, sold off of those highs, but really we're just right there at that resistance level over in the energy sector. So we didn't get in on the good times today, but certainly nothing bad. Struggle at resistance. That makes sense. Over in the industrials, they started really hot and really, that's a pretty big green candle earlier in the day. We did retreat off of those highs, but we know, again, this has been a very strong sector. We know sometimes these sectors get going and buyers use any excuse to get into them. Well, certainly not a very bullish candle to close the day, even though we did close up on the day. We certainly closed near the bottom of the day's trading range, so keep an eye on that. But overall, I mean, hard to complain about this chart. It's certainly been very strong. They're very, very strong sector. So very solid over there. Tech, of course, as goes the NASDAQ, as goes the tech. Really it can't seem to find its footing. And I'm not exactly sure what it is. It hasn't done anything wrong, and I've said that many times, and that's a good thing. It's just, there's always something better, I guess is what it seems like in the market right now. It probably doesn't hurt that some of those bigger companies have been kind of struggling too. Maybe that's a big part of it. Staples pushed down a little bit off of resistance, nothing substantial. Continue to pretty much kind of consolidate up at the top. We'll have to continue to monitor that get into the fun stuff. After we'll look at healthcare, also a flat day for the healthcare sector, continuing to kind of just hover right about that resistance level. So really held its own, not a lot of action over in that sector. And then pretty similar situation with our discretionary. We have pushed our way back up to the top, potentially, thinking about breaking resistance. I like that as a potential breakout opportunity. We'll just have to wait and see if we're able to break through that. But really not too much to see over in that sector. And now we can get into our bearish sector. So let's start with real estate. We had two sectors today that did stuff that wasn't good. Certainly it's one thing to be down on the day. Real estate down almost 1%. Utilities down over 2% today. Here on real estate, they came back to the bottom of that range. They're pretty much just hanging by a thread, right? They're sitting kind of on the bottom of the old trading range we've been in for a few weeks. Closed a little bit below that, a little bit below our 50-day moving average. I will interpret that as a bearish signal as we break through that. Again, just on the other side of things, we want to see that carry over. So many times you'll see something just barely break support or resistance. I mean, we've seen that include a few times recently, right, where it breaks it, but the very next day or sometimes even sooner, it kind of jumps right back into that range. That's why I think getting that momentum the next day is such an important factor when it comes to confirmation. But certainly very weak today, no doubt about it. Closing below support, below that 50. If we break today's low tomorrow, I will consider that bearish. And certainly won't consider it bullish today. Hey, it could change my mind. It can rally back up in there tomorrow, and it'll just be a little fake out or pierce through that, and that's fine. That does happen. But let's watch that going into tomorrow. Utilities absolutely were just slaughtered today. Real estate looked bad, but utilities was that much worse. I mean, just an absolute bloodbath over in utilities. Had fought with resistance for multiple days, gave out early, and it just kept piling on. We did kind of come off the lows, just like we saw some of our top sectors come off their highs. We did kind of come off of those intraday lows, but still very, very bearish. We're in a very similar situation. We haven't been quite as sideways. We've been a little sideways in utilities as we were in real estate. But we're in a very similar situation where we're kind of at that old breakout point, which is lining up with that 50-day moving average, kind of closing right there on the cusp of it. Again, much like real estate, my thought process will be tomorrow is going to be the telling day. If we break that intraday low, I'm going to call that a bearish breakdown and act accordingly. If that doesn't happen, we work back into the trading range. Fair enough. No harm, no foul, at least other than today, if you were in a bullish trade on utilities. But a ton of movement over in the utility sector. Boy, once the ball got rolling on that, it just kind of kept piling on. It just kept dropping and dropping, and very little relief in sight till very late in the day when some profit taking came into play. So very interesting day in the market. Couple potential breaks to the upside, couple potential breaks to the downside in our sectors. Let's be very mindful of how they operate tomorrow. I think that's going to be very telling as to where is this a break, or is this just hey, it went a little bit below support, but no big deal. So let's continue to monitor that. A really exciting day. Some days I complained that the market was boring. Today I have no business complaining about that. When we talk boring, though, we can kind of come back into our metals who continue to trade within their ranges. I haven't decided either way on gold or silver. Not a whole lot to see here any differently than it's been for a while. Here we have gold. Here we have silver, continuing to use the same trading ranges that we've been using for a while. Again, we know sooner or later we're going to come out one way or another. We can determine, hey, would we be interested in trading, up or down? What do we want to see? If so, how do we want to trade it? Do we want to trade the ETF market, the futures market, options market? So we can be thinking about, hey, what do I want to do if silver breaks to the upside, or if gold breaks to the downside, or whatever? So we can be prepared, but until it breaks, we just have to be patient, right? Patience can definitely pay off. Dollar, another boring day in the dollar too, as we continue just to kind of go back and forth, back and forth. So we're kind of getting into some boring stuff now. All right, we saw some exciting stuff, but we're not done yet. Pretty boring day though in the dollar. Continues to just kind of be right here in the middle of the range, hanging on to the short-term level of support. Looking at the way it's kind of developed, I do think you could make an argument that if we do end up breaking through that area, and it's not a very straight line. You guys have figured me out. I can't draw straight lines. If we do break through that, there probably is a little more downward movement that we could work with. And that will be something I'll be open to. Not super keen on it, but I do think that is how I would read this chart, whether I trade it or not. But really nothing to see. Natural gas pushed up early, worked up into the higher end of this trading range that it had been in before kind of throwing in the towel. Profit taking came in again, hit a huge candle yesterday, pretty good candle the day before. At one point in time, this was a pretty big green candle here too. Profit taking came in at around that resistance area. Makes sense, right? Who can blame these bulls taking profits as we approach resistance? We've been pretty sideways, so let's kind of monitor it. But usually, the way it's kind of been behaving is when we get up into this area, it starts to struggle, starts to turn back around. We do have a lot of positive momentum, and we really did shoot up a lot in just a couple of days. So there is some bullish sentiment behind it, but certainly not today. Definitely some profit taking here today at resistance, which kind of makes some sense. Lastly, to end on an exciting note, crude broke out again. This time actually was able to really close strong, right? Our last few breakouts, we talked about breaking 70. The first time it broke out on the intraday, faked out and closed below the breakout point before the day was done. Second time it closed above it, but really lost a ton of momentum on the intraday, right? I never got any upward movement the next day, and then kind of slipped right back into its range. What's really interesting is we kind of close. Obviously a great candle, very strong candle. None of that. We get to the top and take profits and have these huge shadows. So very strong candle, closing right at the top of those shadows from our previous two fake outs. So that's really where we closed. If we can get some upward movement tomorrow, as we've kind of said, many of the bulls have said, this isn't something that just I think. There's upside in crude if it can ever break out. It's just been failing every time it's been trying. If we can get some carryover, I'll maintain that. I do think there's upside into that 74 range within the crude market if we can maintain this breakout. But unlike our previous, 2 times ago on the intraday breakout, it's hard to say anything. We knew that was not a strong bullish sign, right? But the last time we broke out, we wanted, that's positive. That is a break. Let's see if we can get some upward momentum. I don't know how many people were super stoked about it. And who knows, maybe some people were more stoked than others. But today, the way this candle developed, that was a lot more conviction than we've seen in a while. And so monitor it on those little resistance levels from those previous shadows where we closed today, see if we can get some upward movement. But I will certainly personally be considering that a nice bullish signal if that is what we are able to get going into tomorrow. So, man, what a day. It was a lot of fun today in the market. I hope you guys were following your rules. Hope you guys had some good trading opportunities. You can always go in and look for some potential trading opportunities in these areas that are just, breaking through support or resistance. There are certainly some breakout plays, as I was kind of, scanning intraday, not too dramatic during the intraday, but I always am looking around. I saw quite a few interesting potential breakouts. So, go ahead, and if you are interested in any of these areas that are potentially, carrying over breaks of support or resistance, today's going to be a good time to be prepared going into tomorrow. Maybe the carryover doesn't happen and you're out nothing but a little bit of time. Good time looking at some charts, right? But a pretty exciting day in the market. I guess that will do us today, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, boy, it was just one of those days. I don't want to say goodbye because it was so exciting, but I better. You guys got things to do. So as always, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure, and I do appreciate everybody's time. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button on the Tackle Trading YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so you can be alerted to any new videos that we're doing over here. And be sure to follow us over on Twitter to kind of keep up to date with what we're doing on a daily basis during that market hours. If you did enjoy the market recap and find it helpful, it is always helpful to us if you give it a thumbs up to let us know that we are on the right track here. And thank you very much for that in advance. With that, ladies and gentlemen, get out of here. Happy trading, and I will see you in the next one.